Whether you're only just starting out with career mode, or you've been playing career mode in a realistic way for years, hopefully in today's video I'll be able to tell you some of my favourite tips on how I enjoy playing career mode the most. Playing in a realistic way basically means making sure my squad, making sure my transfers and my manager moves are all fairly believable and things that could happen in real life. Of course, by its nature, career mode is already a fairly unrealistic game mode. You'll see the AI doing bizarre transfers, but that doesn't mean that you have to as well. Having these restrictions can help you make the game a bit more fun and a bit more challenging, as one of the two things that a lot of people say about career mode is it can get old pretty fast and it is probably a little bit too easy. So incorporating some of my tips from today's video can really help you out with how your game's going. Anyway, let's have a look at some of my first tips, and this is actually a new one that you can only really do in FIFA 23. So what I've decided I like to do is if I'm playing as a team that's maybe overperforming or maybe should be winning the league no matter what I do, I like to only play my home matches, and instead I use highlights mode for all my FIFA 23 away matches. What this means is I'll be playing random scenarios every time I'm away from home. This makes the scores a little bit more realistic. You don't concede quite as many goals and you don't score quite as many goals. But what you will have is a challenge of having to make sure your few chances you do get do matter. Also, it gives the AI more of a chance of beating you when you're away from home. This is fairly realistic because home teams do have an advantage basically at every single level. If you're simulating all your away matches, that means you're going to lose and draw more away matches, which means you're not going to overperform in the league as much, and it means the pressure on your home matches are a little bit more important. This is something you can only really do on FIFA 23, however if you're on an older version of the game, you can just simulate the match, do a quick sim, and that can be the result instead for every single away match. Another thing I like to do is not spend more money than I've brought in through transfers. I don't like to sign players on pre-contracts or free agents either. I do try and limit myself to maybe one, maybe two free agents depending if they're a realistic signing. For example, I got Forest promoted on last year's game. Instead of just going out and signing 11 really good free agents, I limited myself to a Ukrainian striker and also Jesse Lingard before he officially signed to Forest. I thought these were fairly good suggestions because Forest did need a third choice backup in my save, and also Jesse Lingard, his reputation's fallen through the floor, so it was believable to me that he did join Forest, and I was proven right a few weeks later. Having this kind of restriction where you're only buying players for less than you've brought in does mean you will have to sell players as well if you want to strengthen. Maybe you've got two really good strikers, but you haven't got any right backs. If you want to raise money, you're going to have to weaken your strikers to afford a better defense. This kind of thing is helping you balance your team out and making it a little bit more difficult and a little bit more realistic in my opinion. You can notice a lot of transfer budgets grow really fast on FIFA career mode as well. A lot of the time you can be looking for new jobs, maybe if you're doing a journeyman career, and you can see QPR in League 1, if they've been relegated, have transfer budgets of like £15 million. The biggest one I can ever remember in League 1 is probably Sunderland, who had a transfer budget of around £4 million in real life. So having these kind of massive budgets and having this restriction does help out because you won't be ending up with some huge amount of transfer budget for absolutely no reason. Two other things that really help are limiting wages and player overall. For example, if you're playing as Real Madrid, you can probably sign anyone on any wage and you can have basically any player in the world playing for your club. However, if you're playing for Salford in League 2, then you're probably not going to have anyone who's going to be rated over say 65 or maybe even 66 if you want to make it a little bit easier. This means if you get a really good youth player, sure you could probably play him for about 6 months, but then they would be picked up by a Premier League side. You could see this with someone like Luke Matheson, who came through in League 2, had a really good spell of play for about 6 months, and then was picked up by a Premier League team. You wouldn't see what happens on FIFA career mode a lot of the time. When people are playing, they'll get these really hyped young players in League 2, and they'll continue to road to glory with them the whole way up. When really, if you've set these kind of limits, wages is a nice one if you're signing players, but overall is good for youth players as well, then you are going to have to keep selling these players rather than unrealistically keeping them around when they could easily perform 2 or 3 divisions above this. Something else, if you want to make sure your team is constantly changing, you could always turn up injury frequency or severity to be a little bit higher. This is one of the most underrated sliders in my opinion. How often do you actually get an injury in real life? I would say most players get at least one injury every single season and they'll miss 1 or 2 games. However, in FIFA, you might get that random injury at the start of every month, but that's one player who will be out for 1 or 2 weeks. You might get the occasional one in a match as well, but I'd say overall you probably get around 5 injuries a season, and most of the time they're not even to key players. If you've turned this slider up, you're going to have players out for a long time. Maybe you're going to have players, your only striker, he's out for 6 months. All of a sudden you've got to play an attacking midfielder or a winger up front. Increases the challenge, increases the amount of players that you can have, and it also increases the fun and the realism, in my opinion, quite a bit too. One of the things I've noticed a lot while reading my Discord and reading the career mode Reddit is that a lot of people will just sign basically any player to any team. You can often see a full team of Brazilians on FIFA career mode Reddit while the team is still in League 1. Not only is this totally unrealistic and very unlikely to happen in real life, it's also kind of against the league rules. If you're not into actually following official league rules that I put in some of my videos, then that's fair enough because they can be complicated and hard to follow. However, I always try and have a certain percentage of nationalities in my team. For example, if I'm in League 1, I will try and have at least 65% of my team be English. If I'm in the Championship, maybe half of my team will be English, and if I'm in the Premier League, I have to have at least a third of my team being English. These are not official rules, they're just simple guidelines to help me keep my squad a bit more realistic. You will see a lot of players, of course, from Wales and Scotland in the English leagues, so maybe it can be up to you if you consider these to be foreign players. I don't, but that kind of thing is also a realistic and fun way of giving yourself an easy restriction you can follow super easily. If you're interested in making a save even harder, although maybe throwing a tiny bit of realism out the window, you could also introduce things like storylines to your career mode save, where you can just randomize a random storyline and implement that into your save. I've got a randomizer on my website, but you can check Instagram and Twitter. There's tons of Instagram posts where people have roll a dice and you get a random storyline that you can implement into your career mode. So these kind of things can be stuff like maybe a youth player's fallen out with the youth coach, so you have to release a random youth player, or maybe your captain's decided he doesn't like your team anymore, so you have to transfer list him and sell him to the first team that bids. I think storylines can add a lot of fun to the game, although they probably don't add too much realism. Some of the things that I think add fun but maybe not too much realism could be trying to break in real life records, because if you're going for the Premier League all-time top goal scorer, you can probably do that a lot faster than Alan Shearer or the likely breaker Harry Kane would be able to do in real life. If you want to try and maybe break Wolfsburg's all-time goal scoring record, which is only 66 goals by Edin Dzeko, again this could be a fun 1 or 2 season challenge because you can easily score 30 goals with basically any player on career mode. If you try and incorporate everything in this video, it's going to be a lot to do for your first save, but naturally over the first few times you do these things, you'll start to learn which ones you enjoy and which ones you don't. If you've got any suggestions for things that you keep realistic in your career mode, please do leave them in the comments below, because I love to read them and it might even feature in another video if I make a part 2. But thank you all for watching, hopefully you enjoyed this video, hopefully you have more fun and more realistic career modes, and hopefully you join the Discord and subscribe if you want to see more like this. But thank you all for watching, I'll see you soon, thank you and goodbye.